We'll call this meeting of the Advisory Task Force on Solid Waste to order. Ma'am, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Donna Barrett, Mr. Kevin Brooks, Ms. Stacy Cawthorn is present, Mr. Greg Duckett is present, Mr. Doug Giles, Mr. Denny Hastings, Mr. Matt Harriman,
Here.
Mr. Jeremy Hooper, Ms. Misty Kern is present, Mr. Michael Mallon, Mr. Scott Thomas
Here.
is present, Representative Rusty Grills, Representative Chris Todd is present, Mr. Matthew Turner present, Chairman Reeves, Chairman, you have 9 members present.
Thank you for that. And any other member that may be sitting in the audience, please join us up here on the dais if you would, and get with a microphone because we want your participation. At this time, we're going to start with a prayer and a pledge. I could call on Mr. Turner to lead us in a prayer, and then I'll lead us in the pledge. You would stand, please.
Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this meeting, and we thank you for our time together. We ask you bless us and watch over us and help us make good decisions that are in the favor of this great state and this country in general. We ask that you bless us with wisdom and understanding and grant us a successful meeting. Amen.
Amen. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time I'll call on Chairman Reeves for a few opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Todd. I want to welcome everybody to our first meeting, individuals that are on this committee, people that are in the audience out here today. I'm just thankful for the presenters of TDEC that are going to be here today as well to help us move things along. For people that don't know me, just a little bit of introduction. I'm Senator Shane Reeves from the 14th District. I represent Rutherford, Bedford, Cannon, and Moore counties. I'm a pharmacist by trade. Lived in Tennessee my whole life. My family's been here for multiple generations, and currently I'm the chairman of Senate Energy, Agriculture, and Natural Resources, which is how I kind of got this gig up here with you today, looking at this over the next few years. I've got a couple of my staff members I want to introduce. Hannah Halkias here is my research analyst, and Lucy Myers is my legislative assistant. I'm glad to have them. For participants that are part of this, you should have a binder. It's a fairly simple binder, but in today's binder, you should have a copy of today's agenda. You're going to have the actual public chapter itself of the piece of legislation that got passed to put this task force in place. You're going to have the names and bios of the participants, at least the ones we were able to get. The names of all the participants are actually on the very front agenda. There has the name of the members. And then you have a strategy circle in the past moving forward. Do we need to go over how to use this mic system at all at this point? Do you want to tell them, because folks up and down here, how to do that?
I think that's a really good idea because
Okay.
it's a little unusual today than we normally have in this committee room. They're doing some upgrades to the system. So you should have a single button that is on and off. So if you turn your microphone on, then there's a little red light that will light up right under the foam here, and you'll know you're hot. When you finish speaking, just turn it off. There's a maximum, I think, 3 that can be on at a time. So if we have a 4th person, let's say somebody forgets and leaves their mic on, then I'll mute all, which will cut everything off and kind of reset it. So we have that feature as well. And that's about all of it. Normally we have a lot more features, but that's what we have today.
Thank you.
Chairman.
I suspect we'll have a few more members rolling here today. Took me an hour and 45 minutes to get here from Murfreesboro today. So I wouldn't be surprised if a few individuals still kind of hung up in traffic getting here today. But, hopefully we're going to spend the next 3.5 years together, or three years and a quarter or so together, working through some issues. And I'm certain over the next 3 years together, we're going to spend some time on a number of key issues, including landfill capacity and future needs. Spend some time talking about recycling markets, how to strengthen Tennessee's infrastructure. We're going to look at emerging waste streams, what to do with electronic waste, lithium batteries, solar panels. We've also got to look at funding mechanisms for waste reduction and recycling programs. We've absolutely got to talk about regional cooperation across counties and cities, and then public-private partnerships around new technologies. And I can tell you, after my short time studying this over the last year or two, I'm fairly certain that there is no one silver bullet that we're going to be able to fire over the course of this to solve all of our problems, but maybe a number of iterative steps we can get things moving in the right direction. But I'm honored to be serving on this committee, co-chairing with my friend Chris Todd, and we'll have some fun. So that's my opening comments.
Thank you, Senator. And we have fortunately been friends long before this extent in the General Assembly. So it's neat to serve in this role together on this committee. I am Chris Todd. I'm state representative from Madison County. I represent about 2/3 of Madison County. And this is my 7th year in the General Assembly. I chair the Ag and Natural Resources Committee in the House. And I have my assistant, Rob Cagle, next to me, and then our research analyst, Nathan Witt, beside him. So I appreciate you guys being here today and setting everything up and having it prepared for us. I very much look forward to the productivity of this task force to share ideas and explore solutions from all the stakeholders. And we are very much open to suggestions of folks that we would want to have in here to present, to share ideas at any given time, and then have time for open dialogue as well. One of the things that I wanted to do is on my opening statement, is to read something out of TCA section 28-11, 851A. And this is just sort of a reminder of why we're here, I think. Each county shall assure that one or more municipal solid waste collection and disposal systems are available to meet the needs of the residents of the county. So that means every county is responsible for that county's own trash. No ifs, ands, or buts by state law. So we have to figure this out for our counties and assist them in this overall and overarching issue of what to do with the waste materials that we all produce. So very much looking forward to it and looking to gather information on ideas that many of us may not have ever heard of. So I'm excited about the possibilities. So at this time, would like to meet our task force and all of our members that are here. Just give us 1 to 2 minutes of who you are, maybe your background, and your interest in this area. If there's no other business that we need to do first, that'd be something we'd start with. So I may start down here to my right. And just turn your microphone on, introduce yourself, and like I said, give us 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll
Sure.
go through it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Scott Thomas. I'm an attorney, environmental attorney, practicing with Bassberry and Sims in Nashville. Have practiced environmental law since about 1989. Done a lot of stuff in the solid waste area. Represented clients that managed landfills not only in Tennessee, but in other states as well, especially in the Southeast. Have been involved in solid waste regulatory matters during that period of time too. So that's where my experience is regarding the issues we're talking about today. So.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Cawthorn. I'm with WM. I've been with WM I just recently celebrated 33 years, but I tell everybody I started when I was 5. So just to get that out there. I'm obviously working for WM. We're the largest solid waste sustainability company in the country, but also I am currently the chair of the TDEC UST Solid Waste Control Board. I also chair the environmental committees for the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So with those added responsibilities, we've been very involved with solid waste issues, hazardous waste issues across the board for the state of Tennessee, and working to make sure that we want to have a business-friendly environment in the state and continue to move forward. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Matthew Turner. I'm an environmental engineer, graduated from Tennessee Tech. Spent a stint in consulting, designing wastewater treatment plants for landfills. Then I had a brief stint working for the state with the Department of, the Division of Solid Waste. And then I worked for a private industry for 4.5 years, and now I'm the solid waste director for Murray County, Tennessee.
Excuse me. Everyone, my name is Jeremy Hooper. I'm with TDEC's Division of Solid Waste Management. I have degrees in environmental science from UT Chattanooga and Tennessee Tech, and have been with the Division of Solid Waste Management since 2017, so almost 9 years now. Work out of our Nashville central office and do a lot of stuff in the policy space. Spend a lot of time over here during legislative session, regulations, supporting permitting related work, and just really whatever needs to get done at the division. And happy to be here.
Good morning. My name is Doug Giles. I work for Rockwood Sustainable Solutions out of Lebanon, Tennessee. We're a construction and demolition recycling company. Started in solid waste with Marshall County Solid Waste as assistant director there, and moved on and was the director of Murray County for 2 years before moving into the private sector with Rockwood.
Good morning. My name is Matt Harriman. I am a real estate broker in Murfreesboro, which is Rutherford County. Want to first thank Lieutenant Governor McNally for appointing me to this committee, and Senator Reeves, who's from our neck of the woods, and putting this task force together. While I don't come with technical experience in solid waste like most of you, I like to think I'm kind of the citizen perspective on the committee, especially being from Rutherford County. Where, we feel like is obviously a community where it is at the center of this conversation in a lot of ways. Rutherford County currently takes, I think, a quarter of the state's solid waste. And so the future of our landfill is one of the most talked about things in our community. And so, myself and Donna Barrett, who you'll meet here soon, is, this is a very important issue to us in Rutherford County. So excited to be a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Greg Duckett. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I actually have served in a number of different capacities, one of which about 30 years ago, I was the city's Chief Administrative Officer there in Memphis, Tennessee. I currently am the chairman of the Greater Memphis Area Chamber of Commerce. My full-time position, I am Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer for Baptist Memorial Healthcare Corporation. We own and operate 25 hospitals in 3 states of Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi, soon to be 28. We are in the process of acquiring 2 additional hospitals, but obviously in my various capacities, solid waste management has been a key issue, particularly as we look at XAI and the activities that are going on around it. So I've been attuned to a number of the environmental issues associated with solid waste disposal. And I also would like to thank both Donna Barrett, who I've had the pleasure of working with on the State Election Commission for a number of years, but also Lieutenant Governor McNally for naming me to serve on this committee.
Good morning. My name is Misty Kern. I work for KVAT Foods, or Food City, which is a regional grocer that operates 150 stores in Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. The other side of my job is I am the committee chairman of the sustainability efforts at Food City. And in that role, I have initiated pilot programs for a plastic recycling program in Kingsport, Tennessee with the Eastman Chemical Company with their new molecular recycling, and then also initiated a composting program with our stores in the Chattanooga area. Thank you.
Good morning, and leaders, my apologies for being late. Murfreesboro traffic is We won't even go there. I've seen sides of Nashville that I didn't know existed today. My name is Donna Barrett. I am formerly a state representative serving this body from 2000 to 2010. I currently serve on the Central Tennessee Regional Solid Waste Planning Board. I'm chairman of that committee and have been on that since 2019, where our goal is to assist the counties in our region with finding solutions to landfilling and tremendously exceed our 25% state mandate for diversion. And it is a pleasure to be on this committee and see what we can come up with and the solutions we can come forward to meeting this 50-year-old statute that gives our county and our state the direction to find alternatives to landfilling. I think the opportunities are out there, and I think this is a good body of minds coming together to make this happen. So, Chairman, thank you so much for this service.
I think that has everybody that's here, so appreciate that. Glad to get to know each one of you, and we look forward to additional time together and learning more about each other. We're going to generally operate this committee like we do, this task force like we do a normal committee in the House or the Senate. One person speaking at a time and recognized by the chair, either chair, and try to go in an orderly fashion as much as possible. We've got some presentations and things that we'll be going throughout our tenure. And anything else housekeeping wise that anybody knows of we need to deal with? I think there was one mistake that we got on notice that I think it left Mr. Turner off and had another gentleman on, and I'm not sure how that happened, but we got that straight, at least for what we have in front of us today. So that was one issue we noticed, a little typo situation. So Chairman Reeves, recognize you.
So is it Mr. Mallon? What was the name of the gentleman that's dialing in?
Yeah,
Yeah, Mr. Mallon is dialed in this morning, and I
Okay.
think a couple of these members have got reasons they're not here as well. But got a good group for this very first session here, Mr. Chairman. I did want to make sure, I think everyone fully understands what we're trying to accomplish here. But the public chapter 429 that was passed, for the record, said that this solid waste task advisory committee is going to examine and review issues related to solid waste. She'll focus its examination and review on innovative processes for the disposal of solid waste, and shall review all aspects, including but not limited to landfills, recycling, incineration, agriculture uses, and energy projection. So all things are on the table. This task force is made up of 16 members. I thought it was 15 members, but 16 members. 15 members, including 12 appointed members who have expertise in the subject of solid waste or a subject related to one or more processes for the disposal of waste. And the task force is going to continue to meet through the end of 2028, with hopefully having a report by June 15th of each year. The only other comment I was going to make, Mr. Chairman, then I guess we can roll today, and this was on some of the agenda that we sent out earlier. And when I'm in meetings like this, I can't help but take I got my business hat on all the time of the way I approach things like this, and it's almost like we're building a house. We really are. We're starting at the ground floor here today. We're getting organized. Hopefully, over the course of this next year, we're going to go through a lot of discovery and a lot of benchmarking best practices throughout the country, what's going on in the state of Tennessee. And from that, legislation can start being introduced. And hopefully, through that process, we can create strategy. We can create blueprints moving forward with the hope of ultimately having some larger policy with large budgets to maybe really put us in a position to have a master plan by 2050. Mr. Chairman, final comment. I was thinking of it this morning driving over here, and to me, the guiding question is this: how can Tennessee design a sustainable, resilient, and cost-effective solid waste system that protects public health, supports economic growth, and preserves our environment for 2050 and beyond? And if this committee really does its work, we could do something incredible for many, many generations of Tennesseans for decades and decades. So, couple of the opening comments there. I appreciate you letting me make those this morning. So I guess at this point we can move into the presentation.
Certainly. And you mentioned the gentleman, committee member that is joining remotely. Anybody is able to do that. The entire public can watch what we do here. We want to be open to the public. But members cannot participate as far as having input unless they're here in person. So I just want to make that clear, normal house rules. There's one other thing you mentioned that I thought of, but it'll come back to me, or it wasn't that important. So glad to jump right into our first presentation at this point with the Department of Environment and Conservation, if they are ready to present. I wasn't sure if Mr. Hooper was doing most of that or Miss Alley. Okay, great. It is yours to take off.
All right. Thank you, everybody, first off, again, I really am honored to be a part of this and to be a part of the discussion and get to work with all you. I look forward to meeting you all and talking through this. So, we were asked as a part of this first presentation, us being TDEC, to give an overview of a lot of different stuff. So my presentation is kind of long. I'm going to skip through some slides. I think, a lot of you know who TDEC is. That's in the slide deck. So I'll probably just move through that pretty quickly. But we were asked to talk about a lot of different stuff, an overview of waste in the state, waste infrastructure, obviously with a lot of focus on landfills and remaining life and permitting process, recycling and composting. So I'm going to go through a lot of stuff today. So bear with me. I will try to keep it somewhat quick. So I think, as already been mentioned, one of the main reasons why we're here and why this task force exists is because of what you're seeing on this slide here, which is, landfills have been for a long time really critical infrastructure as a part of the solid waste management process, right? They are really are where we send all of our waste for the most part at the end of its life. And so they play an important role and have for a long time. That doesn't mean that it doesn't change, but it has. And so I think we have to not acknowledge that. And what we've been seeing is a decline in airspace. So the amount of airspace left for disposal in the landfill. We're seeing a lot of that regionally, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on a couple of different slides. And traditionally, if landfill capacity was declining, the landfills have the ability to expand, or some other solid waste infrastructure like solid waste processing facilities, transfer stations could play a role. But what we are seeing is expanding landfills in the state, looking at new ones, and even other solid waste infrastructure. It's not just landfills that are controversial. Sometimes it's recycling facilities, it's transfer stations, convenience centers. But we're seeing that creating new ones or expanding existing landfills is challenging. It's already challenging to begin with, but it's become really contentious over the last, I don't know. I mean, it's always been somewhat controversial, right? Not in my backyard. I understand that, right? I wouldn't want a landfill in my backyard either. But we're seeing a lot of that, and we're seeing local governments using tools that are legal to them to challenge landfills. So what you're seeing on this slide are a couple screenshots of some news articles that I think really drive home the message here, which is the Tennessee Lookout Board denies landfill expansion in Davidson County. Scott County Solid Waste Board sends a letter to TDEC opposing proposed landfill near Oneida. Bill passes to protect Duck River from proposed landfill. And then what has already been mentioned here today is Rutherford County officials vote to deny expansion of Middle Point landfill. So this is happening. It's been happening a lot over the last 5 to 10 years. And if landfills have been a critical part of our solid waste infrastructure, if we're going to have declines in airspace and not expansions, we're still producing waste. So it's got to be managed somehow. So I wanted to set the stage with that, but real quick, just an overview of what I'm going to go through. I'm really going to blaze through the TDEC Division of Solid Waste part, but I do want to reiterate in particular what the division's role is in all this. Then we'll talk about waste in Tennessee, including some basic information about how that plays out in urban and rural environments in the state. And then we'll get into the infrastructure in the state. So landfills, transfer stations, convenience centers. We'll talk about remaining life of landfills. And we'll also talk about recycling and composting, and then I'll summarize it. So you guys, I think for the most part, know what TDEC is, so I'm going to skip right past that. But I do think it's important to remind everyone what the Division of Solid Waste Management does. So our title is Solid Waste Management, and what you're looking at is a screenshot from our website. And those picture tiles are at least the first four are our main programs within the division. So you've got solid waste management, you've got hazardous waste management, you got materials management. So that's our recycling group, solid waste planning. Our toxic substances, they deal with lead-based paint, asbestos, PCBs. And then the other tile, spills, is a pretty specialized program that deals with petroleum spills along roadways. So all those programs do a lot of different stuff, but I wanted to highlight some of the key things that we do that is at least relevant to some of the items we're going to discuss today. So it doesn't mean that these other areas of things that we do is not important, that we probably will talk about at some point, but just to talk about some of the stuff we're talking today. So our solid waste program receives and approves or denies landfill permits. We get remaining landfill capacity data, not from all landfills, but from a couple different types, and I'll explain that. We also get applications in for other types of waste infrastructure, convenience centers, transfer stations, for review, approval, or denial. We provide support, of course, to local government and other stakeholders. Our materials management group, they're the one who do a lot of stuff in the recycling space. They help with monitoring and supporting recycling, composting, and waste reduction efforts. They're the ones who give out grants to local communities to support that kind of stuff, and support solid waste planning. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second, a little bit more. So the solid waste planning is part of something called Part 8, which those boards that on that previous slide where I show some of the boards that have been denying some expansions, which they've been doing legally per their authority, is a Part 8 board. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But there's a tie between the Part 8 board and solid waste planning with our division as it comes to that item. So just a quick overview. Obviously, if we're talking about waste in Tennessee, just some basic metrics help us understand what we're looking at. So the state population, is roughly 7.2 million people. And depending on what metric you look at, you can get stuff from EPA, from us, and others that suggest how much trash an individual produces every year. And the numbers vary, somewhere from 5 to 6 pounds of trash a day. And so when you do the math, it's quite a bit, right? That has to be managed in the state. But the population, according to UT, is expected to expand almost by 1 million people by 2040. So if you use one of those figures of 5 to 6 pounds of trash a day, and you times it by another 1 million people, that's a lot more trash that by 2040, we're going to have to manage. And all that's is going to be occurring while we're, talking about this and going to have options, especially if landfill capacity is declining. And that's a trend we continue to see. We're going to have to manage that waste. So some figures to kind of show where that waste is managed, at least in landfills. There's several different classes of landfills in the state of Tennessee, but I'm going to focus on two main ones. So about 9 million tons of waste are disposed in our Class 1 landfills in the state of Tennessee. It's about 9 million tons. About 4 million tons are disposed in our Class 3, 4 landfills. These are our construction and demolition landfills. So they're ones taking a lot of the new construction and tear downs of stuff going on in the Nashville area and our other metropolitans. A lot of that waste goes to these facilities. So what does that look like from an urban and rural perspective? So these are just generalities. We may want to dive into this more at some point, but roughly 67 to 70% of the population of Tennessee is considered in an urban setting. In those areas, they tend to have greater access to solid waste infrastructure, right? They tend to be closer to more options. They tend to be closer and have more options for recycling, education, and outreach programs. They're more likely to have curbside pickup. So like at my house, I get the trash from my kitchen, I go outside, I put it in the can, someone comes and picks it up, sort of sight unseen. That is less of an option in rural areas. And that curbside can also include recycling options. Of course, they have a larger tax base, so they at least could spend more money on solid waste and recycling. And then in our urban areas, of course, with the increasing development, we're seeing a lot of construction and demolition waste, which is in large part going to those Class 3, 4 landfills. So in the rural areas, Chairman Todd kind of alluded to this earlier. So each county is required to have at least one drop-off spot for waste. These are typically convenience centers. So in rural areas, you're less likely to be close to infrastructure. You're less likely to have curbside pickup, at least curbside pickup that you're willing to pay for. So your option is you got to take it somewhere. So you take it to a convenience center, which is permitted by us. And then the convenience center, it fills up the roll-offs and then that's taken off. So that's a really important piece of solid waste infrastructure in our rural areas. So in the rural areas, there are recycling options, but it's more limited, right? When we look at urban areas. So the services and opportunities are not as robust in rural areas. Smaller government budgets, that's probably one reason why. More agricultural waste in these areas that have to be dealt with. And TDEC gives grants out for recycling, collection, and that's important for urban areas. I think it's even more important for our rural areas that have these limited services. So we've talked about the state population. We've talked generally about how much waste is produced. So where does it all go? I've kind of alluded to this, but kind of going to dive a little bit more into detail on this. So what is the solid waste infrastructure in the state? So I've got a little schematic over on the side. In reality, the arrows cross, but it gives at least a basic picture, right? The waste is produced, it has to be collected, it has to be transported. That transportation could be to recycling, it could be to processing facility to change the characteristics of the waste. And then a lot of it, as we've talked about, ends up in a landfill. Of course, some of the recycling ends up on the market and for reuse. So the infrastructure I'm going to talk about are landfills, transfer stations, convenience centers, solid waste processors, and recovered material processors. So I think a lot of what we are interested in here today is our landfills. So I'm going to spend the majority of the time on them. We're going to talk about the types, the locations, and remaining life. So there's 4 classes of landfills in the state, but we really view class 3s and class 4s as being identical. They pretty much take the same waste and they're regulated very similarly. So just going to focus on 3. So class 1s, this is sort of like the meat and potatoes of the landfills. They can take pretty much everything except hazardous waste. There are some things that require additional approval, but these have synthetic liners. They have gas systems, leachate controls. They're highly regulated. And class 1, we also refer to them as our MSW landfills, our municipal solid waste. So your household waste goes out into a can or goes to a transfer station, it's most likely going to a class 1 landfill. So we've got 29 operating in the state. Class 2 landfills, I'm not going to spend as much time on. I think at some point we probably will talk about them during this process, but just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. These are industrial landfills. They're very much specific to a particular industry. So all of TVA's landfills where they dispose of the ash from burning coal, that's a class 2 landfill. DOE landfills are class 2. Eastman, PCA, those are class 2s. So the permit is in their hands in most cases, and they're just disposing of their own waste. But there are 30 operating of those in the state, and they play an important role. And then the class 3-4s. So these are our construction and demolition landfills. The regulations are not as strict on them, in part because the waste stream is not considered as big of a risk to groundwater, other environmental features, human health, right? So it's a lot of inert material. It doesn't produce much gas. There is some stuff that does produce some gas and some odors, but it's not to the same extent as the class 1s. And there's 52 of these that operate in the state. So historically, if we look at trends, a lot of what I'm showing here, these trends, they started occurring as far back as 1976 when RCRA, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, went into place. Follow up with state laws that start changing the expectations for permitting. And so what we've seen over the decades, 3 decades plus, is declines in the number of landfills being permitted. There used to be a lot more. Now there are fewer that are larger and more regional in nature. There used to be a lot more that the permit was owned by the local government and operated by the landfill, by the local government. We're seeing a decline in that. We're seeing moves to more privately run and owned permits. The space for new and expansions is becoming limited, right? It's already hard to permit a landfill. You got to have the right geology. You don't want to have a bunch of sinkholes. You got to meet some buffer requirements. You got to think about streams and wetlands. So it's already hard to permit them. But, our population is growing. So we're taking up more and more space. And even the available space, getting a landfill permit in those areas can be controversial because, people don't prefer to have a landfill near them. So with those changes and with normal economy changes and other things, we're seeing increasing demand on the landfills that we have and increasing costs to run. So I think this is probably a slide everybody's going to want to spend a lot of attention on. So I mentioned that TDEC gets remaining life data. We don't get it for every landfill, but we do get it for our Class 1 MSW landfills. So this is a relatively new data set we've been getting over the last couple of years due to regulation change, but it requires all Class 1 landfills to submit to us a bunch of data, how much waste they take every year, how much permitted space they've constructed for use, and how much life they have remaining in years and volume. So this data that we get is from those landfills. So it's not our data, but it's sent to us. And we get it and organize it and produce a report that we post on our website. And then we also produce some other stuff like these maps that we share in presentations. So this is Class 1 landfills again, and it's the most recent data we have, so from 2025. So kind of gonna dive into this. So what are we looking at? So there's a couple different data points on here. So you've got size of the landfill, which is size of the shape. We can dive into that as one, but just know that the smaller the shape, the less waste it takes in a year. And there's 3 sizes there. So you got small, medium, large. And then you've got who owns the type of shape, who owns the permit, and who operates it. So our circles on this map are government permits and government-run landfills. So the circle is local government. The triangles are the opposite. They are privately owned permits and privately run landfills. And then squares is in the middle. The local government owns the permit, but a private entity, they've contracted out to run it. So what do you see? If you did the math, you would see that there are more privately run facilities than others and owned. There are still a number of locally owned landfills that they run as the local government. And particularly in East Tennessee, you see a handful of squares that show that the local government owns the permit. It's in their name, but they have contracted a third party to operate it. So perhaps to the purpose of this is what's remaining life look like. So the colors is what's showing us that. So green is 10 or more years. Yellow is 3 to 10 years. And red is less than 3 years. Now, keep in mind that one green compared to another is not equal. What do I mean by that? So a second ago, I said that you have landfills that are small, medium, and large. So they take different amounts of waste a year. So a small landfill, say it takes 100,000 tons a day or a year, 100,000 tons a year. And a large landfill takes 1 million tons a year. They both have 10 plus years left. That's based off of how much they take annually. If this large landfill shuts down and waste starts having to go to the smaller one, their 10 plus years is going to shrink dramatically quicker than if they just took that smaller amount. So these are not 10 years. They don't equal the same thing for each landfill. So just keep that in mind. So what do we see in terms of remaining life at these landfills across the state? So you see a lot of green in West Tennessee. You see a lot of green in East Tennessee. You do see some yellow in East Tennessee and one red. Middle Tennessee, on the other hand, is where that regional decline in capacity has been occurring. So you primarily see red and yellow, so less than 3 years and between 3 and 10 years. There is one green there, White County. This landfill was recently sold by the county to a private entity, WM, and they got an expansion, and that triangle recently changed from red to green. So you see a decline in the Middle Grand Division, which is where a notable amount of our population is, right? You've got the Nashvilles, you've got Clarksville, you've got Murfreesboro, you've got Brentwood and Franklin. So a lot of people live in the Middle Grand Division where we are having declines in landfill space. And as I talked about earlier, traditionally expansions were an option to rectify this. But landfills in this division have been denied expansions. And so we are seeing waste being shipped from where they were normally going, or normally more recently going, and moving around, which I think is an important thing we need to think about in this task force, right? If a landfill shuts down or it closes early, that waste is still being produced. It's got to go somewhere. And that means that neighboring landfills or even the neighboring Grand Divisions are not necessarily immune from declining landfill capacity in the Middle Grand Division. If landfills in the Middle Grand Division start to decline in numbers, that waste is going to go somewhere. If it goes to our east or west, then the amount of capacity in those has the potential to decline. Of course, waste could be sent to other states. It is, and we get waste from other states. But I do think we need to remember that if one county in Tennessee doesn't want waste from a bunch of other counties in Tennessee, there's the potential chance that a county in Kentucky at some point is going to say, why are we taking Tennessee waste? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think we need to keep that in mind as we go through this. So I do believe we'll talk a lot about this and this data as we move forward. But going to my next slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Class 2 landfills in this presentation. Class 3 and 4 landfills. These are the construction and demolition landfills. So you see this map and you see that it only has one color, which is purple. And that's because we don't have the same regulatory authority to get remaining life data for these landfills as we do Class 1s. So it's a bit of a blind spot for us. While we have some data and can talk to the landfills, our ability to understand remaining life at these is limited. So we have some authority to ask for surveys from these landfills to get that information, but I would say it's not as strong as our Class 1s. The Class 1s are required to submit that to us every year. The Class 2s are required to submit it to us every 3 years. So we get standard recurring reports from them. We don't have that ability here. We did try to get that when we got the Class 1 regs through, but we got pushback. Local governments were concerned about the costs, and I understand that. There is a cost to producing this report and sending it to us. So that was removed from the package. So all we can really talk about without really diving deep into this and spending a lot of time is we've got Class 3, 4 landfills, and this is where they are. But they play an important role. So going to go into the permitting process and the economics. So, at the beginning, we showed that landfill expansions are declining, but it's still an option. So landfill capacity with it declining, of course, an option is to expand, like I just said. But before you do that, you got to think about a couple different things. Landfills are not cheap. So what's the economics? Do I have the financials to build a new landfill or to expand an existing landfill? So what's the financials of that? So this slide is to kind of allude to that and also kind of show the costs of disposal in the state. Now, I do want to say this data comes from Environmental Research and Education Foundation. So it's a third party. We just refer to them as EREF. And there's some qualifiers, I should say. These are posted. This data is based off posted rates. Like how much does it say on the gate, maybe the website? If you're a business and you enter a contract with one of these landfills, your tipping fee is probably going to be less. But so this data has value, though, I think, because it does give us some trends. And it does allow us to look at our neighbors and national trends. But again, keep that in mind. There's some qualifiers we have to think about. So they've been collecting this data for a while, and I just pulled it for 2020 to 2024. I highlighted Tennessee. I put our southeastern states there. I highlighted the southeastern average in blue, and I highlighted the national average in that orangish color. So you see in Tennessee from 2020 to 2024, roughly $10 increase per ton in disposal. Again, qualify, but an increase. Now, you do see a lot of variation across those averages, right? The 2024, it says $62 per ton. You see the variations $28. So quite a bit of variation. So again, take it for what it's worth. But when you compare those numbers to our southeastern sister states, we are the highest when looking at the data through this manner. The next closest is South Carolina at $56 per ton, and then Georgia $55 per ton, Florida $53. So we are above the southeastern average, again, when looking at the data through this lens. And our tipping fee on average is now caught up to the national average. So what are the takeaways from this without kind of getting into the weeds? I think our private partners could explain some of the contract stuff and how that changes the cost. But what are the takeaways? The cost of disposal has gone up, which makes sense. And that obviously comes with the disposal goes up. You know, we have declining landfill space, costs to run. It's inevitable that's going to happen. So when you're thinking about expanding a landfill, you got to think about the financials. The landfill's costs are going up for tipping fees. So why is that? In part, it's expensive to run a landfill. It's expensive. So I've got some ranges on here and some values. So this is data that we have that we collect from as a part of our financial assurance process. So just some examples. So to construct, close, and go through post-closure. So for a landfill, you permit it, you divide it into cells, you construct a cell, and then you fill it up, you move to the next cell. Cell construction can vary from $200,000 to $400,000 per acre. And it depends on the size of the landfill, depends on the geology, depends on the soil availability. So it depends on a lot of stuff, but that's expensive. Closure costs. So to close the landfill, $175,000 to $250,000 per acre. And then post-closure, which for class 1 landfills, this is when you close the landfill, you have a minimum 30-year monitoring period. So you're monitoring groundwater, you're monitoring air, you're mowing the landfill, you're making sure the cap is good, there's no erosion. So those costs, a lot of that's upfront in that 30 years, but $150,000 to $250,000 per year. Expensive stuff, especially the larger your landfill goes. So those tipping fees are trying to in part cover those costs and make some money if you're private. If you're local, maybe just cover your cost. Now, the cost is also affected by your operational efficiency. So at a landfill, airspace is money. The more waste you can put into a smaller space, the more money you can make. So if you want a higher efficiency, that's great because you can get more money, but you need good equipment, you need good staff and training, you need the design of the landfill to be appropriate for that. And then you see some other things. So these are just some of the things that affect operational cost. So again, you're thinking, I want to expand my landfill. Do I have the finances to do this? Can I construct the landfill? Can I close it? Can I operate it? Can I deal with post-closure costs? The other thing, there is a liability on the books called financial assurance. And this is a cost that's in regulation that is required by TDEC. And what financial assurance is a financial mechanism that TDEC could tap into should the landfill go under, the business go bankrupt, and that landfill sitting there open. That money is to protect the state and taxpayers from having to come in and rectify that situation. So financial assurance has to be posted for all these landfills, and we have to have access to it. And it can total, for one landfill, millions of dollars. So you see some of the things that are in the cost that we consider, but for the state as a total, TDEC there's financial assurance liabilities of $1 billion for landfills. That's a lot of money. And that's a lot of liabilities. Now, of course, that's spread across all those landfills. I highlight the financial assurance liability for public facilities here. The reason why I'm doing that is private landfills, they're in the business, they do this. But if you're a local government trying to run a landfill, it's very costly, right? There's those constructions, there's the operations, there's a closure. So financial assurance is a big thing for all the landfills, but in particular for these local governments. So we have almost $400 million of liabilities and financial assurance on the books for local government landfills. Now, of course, that's spread out, but they have to account for that on their books in addition to constructing the landfill, operating the landfill. So it's expensive. So you decide you want to expand a landfill. You decide you have the financials to address it. Now you got to get the permit. And this is an important thing because we looked at that landfill capacity map. We saw some reds. We saw some yellows. The reds, less than 3 years of life remaining. If you have less than 3 years of life remaining and you've not submitted an application to us, really cutting it close. These applications are big, right? These are big things, big landfill with a lot of trash in it, sitting over top of geology, that groundwater. So there's a lot to it, and it takes time to review adequately so that we're, doing justice and protecting human health and the environment. So what I have here is just a general list of the major components to a landfill application, and the time periods are listed in blue. Those time periods are regulatory clocks. That means that TDEC has that many days to process that part of the application. You should not look at them concurrently. They don't necessarily run concurrently. So what do I mean by that? The major parts of an application, a part one, that comes in, submitted to us. That's a who, what, where. I want to expand a landfill. We take that, make sure it's complete, and we use that to send out a public notice. We often get those in months before we get the meat of the application, which is the part two. The part two has 4 components. The part 2A, which is the hydrogeologic report. The part 2B is the engineering. The C, the narrative description. And the D, the closure post-closure. So we typically get the part 1 in, months can go by, and we'll get a part 2A, the hydrogeologic report. This is the report that tells us where they want to expand, what the geology looks like. Is there karst features there? Is there caves, sinkholes that could preclude this or have to be addressed? Where's the groundwater level? So in other words, how far down into the ground can they go? What do they have to do to address groundwater? And then it could be months or even longer before we get the part 2B, C, D, which is really the engineering plans and closure. When we get all that stuff, these clocks are running. We have that 270 days technical clock, but that clock stops often. So if there's a deficiency in the application, which is common, right? These are big applications. It's hard to get it all right. We find a deficiency. We send a note to the applicant, say, hey, we need this information. We need clarity. They work on that and get back to us. That's not necessarily a fast process. So that takes X amount of time. And then after all that's done and we've made a decision, then we've got to go through the 45-day public comment period. Get those comments in, respond to them. And in this case, if we're approving it, then we got to sign the permit. So point is it takes a lot of time. It's not uncommon for this to take 30 months or more to get through. So you've decided you got the financials, then you got to get this out. You got to get through this. But there's some things that have to occur before that. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on that. So if you're an applicant applying for an application, you got to do the necessary studies, hire the consultants to do the hydrogeo work, produce the report, produce the engineering report. That takes X amount of time, and then send that in to us. But you also have to ensure if there's any water features that have to be addressed, streams, wetlands, those have to be addressed. And then 2 laws that I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail here. And I've alluded to one of them, the Part 8 board. So we've got Jackson Law. I say if applicable, so not always applicable. And then the Part 8 board, always applicable. So I'm going to talk about these. So these are local, by law, local tools to weigh in on a landfill and sometimes some other facilities like a solid waste processing facility. So Jackson Law, we often refer to that as Part 7, just internally, Part 7. So this is a tool that allows governments to weigh in on a landfill or a solid waste processing facility. To weigh in, they have to adopt Jackson Law. If they adopt it, they can approve or disapprove a landfill or solid waste processing facility. TDEC cannot review that application until this is addressed. So if Jackson Law is applicable, if you send us your application, we can't do anything with it. We have to wait until this is addressed. Now, it's not applicable to landfills that existed on June 2nd, 1989. So if you're after that and the local governments adopted it, then you're subject to Jackson Law. So what are the criteria that Jackson Law considers when evaluating a landfill or solid waste processor? It's these here. So they have to, in deciding to approve or disapprove it, they have to decide on the type of waste. They look at the type of waste, the method of disposal, the projected impact on the surrounding areas from noise and odor, projected impact on property values, adequacy of existing roads and bridges to address increased traffic, economic impact on the county, city, or both, compatibility with existing development or zoning, and any other factor which may affect public health, safety, or welfare. So if you're a landfill and you're in one of these counties in orange and or the cities in blue, these are the ones we're aware of. It's possible there's some others. All of these have adopted Jackson Law. So if you're a landfill or solid waste processor and you were constructed, built after that 1989 date, you've got to go through Jackson Law of at least the county, perhaps both. I don't know if there's both, that maybe they do it consecutively. I'm not 100% sure how that works. The point is they've got to go through this before they can submit their application to us. So that's part 7. In addition to part 7, there's part 8. And part 8 has some connection to part 6. Part 6 is what gives TDEC the authority to create a state solid waste management plan, which we're currently updating right now, the 2035 plan. But part 8 was created during the 1991 Solid Waste Act. And that was probably the last major reform on solid waste in the state. And part 8's purpose was to improve planning, especially at the local level, encourage regional planning, regional partnerships, and encourage waste reduction, recycling, et cetera. So each county has to participate in part 8. They all have to have a plan. They can join and be a region. So what does that look like? Again, the 91 Act wanted to promote regional partnership. So what currently does this look like? We have 8 multi-county boards consisting of 34 counties and 61 counties that participate in single county boards. Here's the map. So the law wanted to promote some regionalization. Some of that has occurred, but you see a lot of white, so single board counties. And then the counties in color, of course, they're associated with those other counties in a region. So the Part 8 board does more than just approve or deny a landfill, and I'm going to talk about that. But if you're a landfill, if you're trying to get an expansion, you have to submit this to the Part 8 board for approval. Again, you might have to do Jackson Law. And the board is supposed to approve or deny the expansion based off whether it's consistent with their 10-year management plan. So each county has to have a 10-year solid waste management plan. And that plan has to be consistent with the state plan from Part 6. So some recent examples of this, and these are 2 examples that I showed on that first slide from those news articles. So Davidson County, their Part 8 board denied WM's Class 3 Southern Services expansion. And then the Central Board, which is over in the Rutherford County area, they denied Middle Point's expansion. So if denied, whether it's Jackson Law or Part 8, TDEC cannot review those applications. They're dead in the water. So that's it. So
You're recognized.
I don't want to interrupt.
There
I
you
don't want to interrupt the presentation, but I know we're covering a lot of information. And on this specific item, I wanted to point out to the board that both those denials were upheld by the courts.
that's right.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
correct.
Thanks
That's
for
correct.
that.
Yeah, so they can be challenged in the court. I think the Chancery Court, and so they were upheld. Yeah, so legal avenues to, yes, absolutely. So what does the board do besides that? So their functions, they develop the 10-year solid waste management plan. That plan has to outline how they'll address disposal needs in their county or region, collection needs, and how they'll address the 25% reduction of solid waste going into Class 1 landfills that's required by the 91 Act. There's a bunch of other stuff, and I'll show you in a second. But the plans have to be consistent with the state plan. That's from Part 6. They have to submit annual progress reports to us to show how they're meeting their plan and that 25% reduction goal. And then, like I said, review and approve or deny landfills applications. So who sits on these boards? There's 5 to 15 members. It must be an odd number, and they serve for 6 years. They're appointed by the county or participating municipal mayors. So this is, the counties are sort of the main structure of this, but municipalities can participate in it. So there has to be a member from each county, and then municipalities can participate as well. Those are folks who can be on the board. They don't, but the purpose of it, which I think is probably the purpose of this task force, is reflect diverse interests so that everyone who's affected by solid waste or has a role in it has a say in the planning process. And the appointments are approved by the legislative or governing bodies of those on the Part 8 board. So what's in these plans that are used to plan for solid waste and recycling and weigh in on landfills? State law requires 17 minimum items. I won't go through them all, but they are listed here. But just in short, you got to say, well, what's our population in the county? Where are they? And what is their needs, essentially, that we have to address? What are the waste streams that are produced in this county? Are there agricultural, industrial? Is it just household that we would have to manage? What's our collection capability, our disposal capability? What's the remaining life? The cost to do all this, including revenues brought in. Growth trends expected over the next 10 years. So this is a planning tool. You want to look at into the future and to say, hey, this is what's coming. Are we planning to address that, or do we already meet it? A recycling plan, plans for other waste, household hazardous waste, disaster debris, how you're going to attain the 25% reduction goal. And I thought this one's interesting, an evaluation of the multi-county solid waste disposal region options. So you can just participate as a single county, but you have to evaluate per this plan a regional option. And if you don't take it, you've got to explain why you didn't. And then getting towards the end here. So an important thing to remember in Part 8 is they have the authority to create these plans. They don't have the authority to implement them. So it has to be done by some other entity like the local government or local governments that participate. The 91 Act recognized that and created another mechanism that could be used to do that. And that's Part 9 solid waste authorities. So there's Part 6s, there's Part 7s, there's Part 8s, and there's Part 9s, all playing a role here. The Part 9 has legal authority to enter into contracts, receive revenue, I think pay staff. So they can actually implement these plans should the county or region wish to do that. So in short, well, starting to sort of wrap this up. So I've mentioned Part 6, Part 7, Part 8, Part 9, but there are some other things that have a role in the solid waste space that I've seen that we probably are going to want to talk about. There's interlocal agreements, there's the development districts, there's private acts. I don't necessarily, as we sit here, understand all of them, but I just want to point them out as playing a role in this overall process. And before moving to the next thing, here's a map showing the Part 9 authorities. Okay, so landfills have been a critical backbone in the state across this country for managing waste, but there are other solid waste infrastructure out there. And if landfill capacity is declining, they're going to play an even more important role. I mean, we've seen this recently in Rutherford County. The county decided to take more control over how they manage their waste. They permitted and constructed a transfer station and now send some of that waste that was going to Middle Point to other locations. So these are becoming important. They're already important, but they have the potential to become even more if the trend of landfill decline continues. So what are these? So transfer stations, if you're not as familiar, these is like a centralized location where smaller trucks go out, pick up trash, and they bring it to this centralized location, and it's put into larger trucks and then sent off to, say, the landfill. So why do this? It helps with the economy of scale, logistics. reduces the amount of traffic on roads. So if we didn't have these, then all these smaller trucks would be trying to get to landfill. So these are pretty crucial options. We've got 96 of them operating in the state. Then we've got convenience centers. This goes back to Chairman Todd talking about each county has to have at least one drop-off location. It's pretty much convenience centers. And as you see, there's 528 operating in the state. So there's more than one per county. Sometimes a county has quite a few. Solid waste processors. So these actually can be affected by Jackson Law, but what they do, not Part 8 though, what they do is process waste. It may be to treat, say, medical waste or a wastewater, or break down waste to send it off to its next destination. So we have 71 of those. And the recovered materials processors do the same thing as solid waste processors, but they do it with essentially recyclable materials. So these are, again, they're becoming more and more important, but at least as we sit here today, their use alone doesn't resolve our landfill capacity issues. And at some point, we probably need to talk about imports and exports. So just real quick, here's two maps to kind of illustrate this. So they're the same maps, but the top one has convenience centers. Those are in blue. I removed those for the bottom map because they kind of overtake all the transfer station and solid waste processors, so you can see where they are in the state. So spread out all across the state. So outside of normal solid waste infrastructure, landfills, transfer stations, convenience centers, we do have other options, right? And if landfill capacity is going to decline, these have the potential to play an even bigger role. So recycling in Tennessee. As I said, the 1991 Solid Waste Act promoted recycling and was trying to encourage it more. It challenged each region to reduce the amount of waste going into Class 1 landfills by 25%, and that has to be reported to TDEC. Recycling numbers can be evaluated differently, and by different folks, you can see different stuff. So this is a recent external evaluation of our recycling, and they found that Tennessee had one of the lowest, the nation's lowest recycling rates, around 22%, ranking us 48th. Again, different evaluations could find us a little bit higher, but the point is recycling, while it plays a role here, it's not playing as big of a role as I think the 91 Act would hope by now. Recycling markets are limited, and our infrastructure is also limited, right? So markets can fluctuate, and it depends on the type of material, glass, cardboard. So that they are limited. And we thought this was worth mentioning. So we've talked about recycling for a long time. So we talk with our partners, local governments, private industry, on how to make this thing work. And recently we heard, and we've seen private industry say this, in other states, but that they're less likely to develop a large scale recycling facility if they don't have reliable feedstock, right? You're not going to build a facility and then not get a bunch of material. You say, well, let's send it to them. Well, it's somewhat complicated, or it can be. Recycling materials can be contaminated, and then if they're contaminated, they just get kicked out and sent to a landfill. And then they're not always separated from one another. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but it just adds a layer of complexity to it. So, where there are some requirements and grants to support that can lead to greater success in certain areas. We wanted to, for this presentation, look at recycling costs compared to solid waste costs, but we're trying to evaluate that right now statewide, and we certainly are open to our private and public partners to weigh in on that. But, from our perspective, it can be highly variable across the state. From one end of the state to the other. It can also be highly variable depending on the type of material that you're trying to recycle. So we do want to talk about that more in the coming years as we go through this. So, in short, recycling has and continues to play a role in Tennessee, and I think an important one. But right now, economics make it where it's, in many cases, still cheaper to dispose of stuff in a landfill or use some other alternative. So composting programs, so another way to keep stuff out of waste. So a significant amount of our waste that goes into Class 1 landfills is food waste and organics. So an opportunity to do other stuff with it. We've had composting programs for a while, and you see we've got a handful of orange dots on the map, and those are our permitted facilities. So we don't have very many. Now, composting can occur without a permit if it meets certain thresholds and stuff. So I don't have as we sit here, good data on that. But I think the take-home message is composting is where there was hope that it would have a greater effect from the 91 Act on reducing stuff into landfills. I don't think it's met that up to this point. Is there opportunity? I think so. But currently, we're not seeing that. So I know this has been long, and I apologize. So in summary, waste in Tennessee is generated by everybody, right? Every person, every business, enterprise, governmental unit. And we at TDEC think that the proper management of this waste is as critical to economic and community development as managing municipal sewage, providing safe drinking water, and ensuring a stable power supply. In fact, all of those critical pieces of infrastructure produce waste that have to be managed. So we think this is really critical. And there's increasing demand. You know, each person in the state, as I said, produces maybe 5 to 6 pounds of waste a day. Our population is expected to increase by almost 1 million by 2040. So that adds, if you do the math, at least another 1 billion pounds of trash that has to be managed. Our economy is expanding, which can produce more waste. So all this waste is going to have to be managed, and all this is occurring at a time where we're seeing a general trend of declining landfill airspace. But we want to meet the state's needs, right? We think every individual business, government unit, all those need consistent, economical, and reliable waste management options. And like I said earlier, historically, this was addressed through expansions of landfills or development of new facilities, whether it be processors or recycling facilities. But the controversial nature of solid waste infrastructure, and again, that's not just landfills, that's solid waste infrastructure as a whole, is challenging this approach. So to wrap it up, you know, our population's growing, our economy's growing. All this is happening at the same time that we're seeing declines in landfill airspace. And if we don't do something, we think we risk our ability to manage solid waste responsibly and reliably for existing citizens and industries, and failing to do something could negatively impact public health, the environment, and Tennessee's ability to attract new investment from companies and facilitate economic growth. And with that, I apologize for the length of that.
Mr. Hooper, that was an incredible amount of information in a short period of time, and I dare say I could not have done anywhere close to as good a job of consistently presenting that and making it flow like you did.
Thank you. I
Excellent.
practiced.
Excellent. When I saw the volume, I thought, wow, this is going to be something, but did an excellent job with that.
Thank you.
Chairman Reeves, I'll let you start with some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hooper, that was excellent. Really was just great content for this committee. And I've got a number of questions, but I want to make sure to let the committee overall ask a number of things. But I think I'll start with something kind of simple here. And if you can or cannot answer this, let me know. But
Sure.
On that one slide you showed, which had all our level 1 landfills,
Sure.
class 1 landfills back there. Are you able to tell us which of these are the newest landfills? Can you give me a sense of what's new? And
So-
can you also let us know, are there any current applications in process today that you can share with us as far as filling this out?
Yeah, good question. So, I can speak. Okay, sorry. Great questions. So new landfills really don't happen. Every now and then someone comes and asks us about them, and they never really manifest. So really everything you're seeing on this map has been permitted for some time, many decades, sometimes more recent. And what you are seeing, some of the, like if we looked at last year's map, you would see that the colors have changed of these, meaning that they were granted expansion. So that's sort of the newish, if you will, portions of landfills. And we do have a number of applications in-house. We always do for class 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. I don't know off the top of my head which ones, but I'm happy to get back to you all so that you can look at this map and compare that. But I don't know off the top of my head.
But those are expansion requests.
That's right.
So you don't have anything new on the pipeline, correct?
That's correct.
And looking at this page here, you don't really have a sense of what is our newest. I'm just trying to get a sense of how old this infrastructure is up here.
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head, and I apologize, but I can get back to y'all. I can provide the map with some dates and including which ones have applications in-house.
Okay. So I have more questions, but I want to make sure to let other folks ask things if they've got them. So members, questions?
Sure. Ms. Barrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the presentation. It was very, very thorough. I have two questions. My understanding in the presentation that's been given to other conferences in the state,
Mhm.
I believe there are a number of landfills that are permitted and not operational.
That's correct.
What is that quantity?
Good question. So yes, there are a number, and I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm happy to get back. There are a number of landfills in this state that have permits, and some of them have had permits for a really long time, and they haven't, for one reason or another, they have not decided to move forward with them. I think a lot of times it's economics. Things have changed over time where the cost to run the landfill and build it would be different. I don't know that number. We do have it, and I'd be happy to get back to you on that.
And from previous conferences I've attended, I believe that number is 6, if I'm incorrect on that. If
For
you-
class ones?
I think it was
Okay.
class 1s, but I think the quantity was 6. But
Okay.
it would be interesting to know that information.
Absolutely.
And then secondly, your presentation listed the class 2 landfills, 30 of them operational. 2 questions regarding that. Are there any of the class 1 landfills that are also class 2 landfills?
Are there any class ones that are class 2s?
You have class 3 and 4s together that they could.
Oh, no.
Demolition and construction. So none of the class 1s or class 2s. It can't be both.
That's correct. They're not both, right? I guess that's a interesting question that I would like to get confirmation on, but landfills, there is a process and regulations to change your class. But are there any currently that class 1s that are class 2s? No, I don't think so. Are there any class 2s that take class 1 waste? I would have to confirm. I don't know off the top of my head.
And so from that comes another question. One of the reasons for asking that is if our class 1s are not to be class 2s as well, we have, at least our regional landfill has aluminum dross and various things that are not solid waste. Those are industrial waste. So I'm curious to know how we ended up at that position. I know that's probably a conversation for a later time, but just so that is a question regarding process.
Sure.
But then secondly, if we don't have the class 2 information on here, why not? That is still something that I'm assuming is a landfilling situation, and it obviously utilizes space, and at some point in time, that's going to be in a critical location as well.
Sure.
If we're addressing the other categories, I think the class 2 category information ought to be included as well.
I'm happy to provide it. I only left them out for brevity. I mean, your questions are fair. You could change a landfill class. I didn't think about it in that regard for presenting the information, but I have that information. I'm happy to send follow-up with y'all and talk through it. I only did it because I felt like my presentation was getting long, and I thought that those would be the focus landfills, but your point's fair.
Thank you.
And to follow up on that, I would, I guess, ask for clarification. When you talk about a class 2 and a class 1 together, are you talking about in the same cell or on the same property? Because I believe you can have a class 1 on a piece of property and a class 2 in a different section. And there's 2 separate permits, I guess.
That's correct. Yeah, we definitely have some like complexes of landfills, if you will, where there's multiple different classes, but they're permitted separately. But I'll get clarity on all that stuff.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, Jeremy, if I'm not incorrect, class 2s are monofills, right? They take waste only from one industry, right?
Yes, but I mean, there may be, I think some historical ones are different, but yes,
Yeah.
if someone asks me what's a class 2 do, it's a really you think of as a monofill. It takes a particular
Yeah.
waste stream from a particular industry.
So for instance, ABC industry company could create their own
Yeah.
and permit their own class 2 landfill for their waste
That's right.
streams. But a class 1 can take practically anything, right?
It can.
So that ABC company could send their waste to a class 1 landfill.
Mhm.
And that's why some industrial waste ends up in class 1 landfills.
That's correct. Yeah, so class 1s are pretty much the catch-all. They can take pretty much everything, but hazardous waste. Now, there are some waste streams, industrial ones,
Right.
that have to go through what we call the special waste process, where before they take it to the landfill, they have to submit an application to us. We review that. If we approve it, it's good for 3 years. And then they have to recertify after that for another 3 years should they want to keep doing it. But to your point, yeah, industrial waste can go to a class 1 landfill.
So class 2 landfills are helpful to know, but they're specific to a particular industry who wants to manage its own waste.
That's right.
They don't, class 2 landfills typically don't take waste from outside. They're not permitted to do that, right?
That's correct. And I mean, I'm not aware of one. I obviously don't know every permit in the state, so it's possible there are some unique ones that take maybe some outside stuff, but I can confirm that, but
Yeah.
your description is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think you made a really good point there that the class 1s can be a catch-all. 'Cause
That's
I've
right.
seen that too, where demolitions going into class 1, you're like, well, why would we fill up that airspace?
That's right.
And so that may be an opportunity for this task force to address that we, preserve the class 1 space by making sure that those waste streams go to the appropriate class.
That's a really good point, right? So if a class 3 landfill decline is, it's not allowed to be permitted or it closes, that waste can go and we see that to a class 1 landfill, which starts to impact that capacity.
Especially after a storm event. We've seen
yeah.
that all over the state. where-
I worked on a lot of Hurricane Helene projects through TEMA, and we were having some capacity concerns over there because of that. Those are it's hard. You don't plan for that.
Sure.
So yeah. And if we have something like that again, we are likely to have more strains. And we did a really good job of keeping a lot of vegetative debris out of landfills, but doing that presents its own challenges. There's a lot of mulch to manage.
No doubt. Any other questions? Mr. Chairman?
Sure, I've got a few here still. So can you speak a little bit, you mentioned this in your presentation, importing, exporting waste. Do we have counties that are currently exporting outside the state?
We do.
And then do we have counties that are accepting trash into their counties? Can you talk about that a little bit?
We do, and we're evaluating that. This has been talked about with Ms. Cothran and our solid waste board. So we wanted to look at that for a variety of reasons. One is it has the potential. So every bit of waste that goes across a class 1 landfill's tipping floor or scale, there's a surcharge on that. 35 cents per ton comes to the solid waste program to pay for permitting and inspections. And then 90 cents of that goes to our program materials management that gives money back out in grants. So one of the reasons why we want to look at that is to see if that's impacting us. But another is if we're having capacity issues and we're bringing in more waste and not exporting more waste, how is that impacting us? As we sit here, I don't know the answer, but we've been looking into that and we'll have a clearer picture by sometime with one of our next meetings.
Ms. Cothran?
Thank you. And Jeremy, thank you for bringing that up. I know our solid waste board has been looking at that. As Jeremy said, there's the split between the $1.25 per ton that's collected that goes to every class 1 landfill. And one of the issues that has come up as, capacity issues grow in the state of Tennessee and more municipalities start shipping their waste streams out of state, that decreases, the money collected for the solid waste programs and the material management programs, which is what keeps everything funded along with, when I did my homework, part of one of the things that I listed numerous times was recycling and what are we going to do to pay for that recycling. And one of the ways we pay for that in Tennessee, a lot of times is through the materials management grants. And if the money is not coming into that grant program, then those grants are not available for municipalities to create recycling programs.
Excellent point. Yes, sir.
That's right. Yeah. And, we talked about earlier about urban versus rural and how these grants they're important for all communities, but they're really important for our rural areas. And so if we get a decline, anyways, to be sure, we're looking at that.
I have another question. And anybody that has a question, just get my attention or Rob's, and we'll jot your name down and call on you next. Try to keep it in order. Can a closed class one that still has capacity be reopened? And if so, what kind of time frame might that take?
So that's a good question. So we have landfills that are mothballed, meaning that they are like kind of closed, but the permit's still active and they still have airspace. So they could reopen that and start putting waste back in there. Now, a landfill that's closed and the permit's been terminated, they would have to go through the entire, it would be like permitting a new landfill.
As far as follow-up information, could you maybe provide us a map with any potentials that are still permitted and might have airspace? Thank you. Anyone else? Chairman Reeves?
Yep, thank you. Okay, members, it's a good chance to ask questions here. So if y'all have got things, I want to talk about these tipping fees for a minute.
Sure.
And get a better understanding of that and why we're so high as everybody else. Is that a product, in your opinion, of it's just more expensive to operate them in Tennessee? Is it because of operating costs? Is it because of environmental regulations? Is it because of a lack of competition? I'm just really trying to understand
It's a good question.
why are we the highest in the South?
It's a good question. And I kind of look to maybe some of the committee members who have some experience. So if y'all have anything, Stacy, if you have some thoughts, please weigh in. I think it's becoming more expensive to dispose of stuff. There's declining landfill airspace. So, that airspace is now more competitive for waste. I think if you look at Alabama, my understanding is they have a lot of landfills, a lot more than us. So because of that, they have, cheaper, they have other options. And obviously I'm not saying that's a good idea. I mean, I don't think the state wants a bunch of more landfills, but when you look at the number of landfills, the amount of waste produced, so our population is bigger than Alabama, Mississippi, not Georgia, but we're bigger than Kentucky. So that probably has something to do with it, right? The amount of people, the amount of waste being produced, the economy size. But if others have thoughts, I'm certainly open to it, because that's just one perspective from
Ms.
the
Cawthorn?
TDEC.
Yes, and Jeremy hit the nail on the head, because we WM, we have landfills in East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and West Tennessee. The cost structures, pretty much across for building and maintaining are the same, but where you get into why are the costs different, it all boils down to landfill. How much capacity do you have left of your airspace? So the smaller amount of airspace you have, then you have this much. And if that's all you have left, you're going to charge more for that. If you have this much, then you can charge less for that when it comes into your facility. I know that's really elementary, but that's essentially what it is.
I had the exact same question written down that Chairman Reeves had as well. And supply and demand is what you're saying. And again, that regulatory process, the length of time, because moving dirt in Alabama is the same as it is in Tennessee. No difference in cost. The liner costs the same. All of those things are going to be the same. So that I think would generally make sense. So thank you for confirming that.
Can you go back to that tipping fee slide for a
Sure.
minute? It's interesting to me too that every single state except for North Carolina has gone up. North Carolina is actually going down.
Yeah.
So I would really love to understand what they're doing in North Carolina to be more efficient. Are they building more landfills? Have they put something in place to try to control that more? What's happening there?
I will look into that. It's a good question.
Mr. Duckett, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you. It was a follow-up on previous question regarding if a landfill was closed but still has capacity and the permit has not been terminated. My question is, if a new operator owner takes on that responsibility, how is liability handled as it relates to the prior?
So
operator?
if a new person takes over the permit or operation?
Yes.
Yeah, so permit transfers can occur. They have to go through a modification of the permit. And so they would have to do that and get approval through us. I mean, that happens. It's not uncommon for, I mentioned earlier, White County recently sold their landfill to WM. So we did the permit transfer process. But the liability then shifts hands if the permit is in that name, that new person's name, and they're operating. The financial assurance liabilities and maintaining compliance with regulation is in the permit holder's name. So, and then, there may be some other stuff that's outside of my regulations, some environmental liability insurances that we don't deal with. But what we look at about who's held to the compliance is the permit holder.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to go back to the question about cost. I know that one of the things that makes Tennessee's landfills more expensive is our geologic buffer requirement. So federal requirement only requires 2 feet of compacted soil versus Tennessee adds an additional 5. So there's the cost to construct that additional soil, and you lose about 8,000 yards per acre. So that's less airspace you can charge for constructing the exact same footprint in Tennessee.
Is that layer of soil, is that what's underneath?
Correct.
The liner? Okay.
Correct.
So the original construction.
Yeah, so Tennessee requires 7 feet of separation between the liner, top of the liner, and groundwater. Federal requirement's only 2 feet. So,
Okay. Thank you for that.
So why is that?
That's a good question. I don't know the history there, Matt. We have a lot of karst in the state. Maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't know. So I will look into that.
And maybe the regionality of that, and where we don't have karst.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'll
have a
have to look.
different.
I'll have to look at that.
Okay. Mr. Thomas.
I think I already know the answer to this question, Jeremy, based on your conversation earlier with Stacy, but do we have any idea how much waste produced or generated in Tennessee is being disposed of outside the state?
We have some
Percentage
data
or something?
on. We have some data on that. We're trying to make sense of it. We just started kind of looking into it. In addition, we found reports from our neighboring states that show numbers of imports and exports from them, and some of those have numbers from saying that Tennessee sent X amount. So we're trying to rectify that and see what the picture is showing. So we have some information. We're just trying to figure out what it's showing, what its limitations are. But be happy to get back to you on that.
Well, I think one of our challenges in solid waste and landfills is going to be that because of interstate commerce, we can't we can't force waste to stay in the state.
That's right.
And we can't force waste outside the state to not come into the state.
That's right. And that's a good point. We've talked about that. So earlier I said, a Kentucky county may get tired of it. What happens? And I don't know. He's right. But I don't know could they just increase the price on Tennessee stuff coming? I don't know what's there.
Yeah.
But I think, and maybe you'll help us understand that, but
Yeah,
we need to make sure we understand what the implications of that is.
No, and that's right. And it's a two-edged sword because, one theory you could say, well, let's let all the waste go outside the state and let other states deal with it. But as I think Stacy pointed out, some of our funding for programs comes from fees we charge for waste that's disposed of in the state. And so the more that escapes the state, the less revenue we are able to collect for those programs. So it's
correct.
It's a challenge for us.
Mr. Giles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment on that, I know there's one Part 9 authority that was listed on the slides that is exporting into Alabama. But all of that waste is going through transfer stations. I think something that this body needs to look at some point is possibly shifting that fee from landfill down to transfer station. So we're capturing that waste that's generated in Tennessee and we're funding our recycling program, no matter what state it goes for final disposal. But as we talk about the tip fees in one state or the other, I think Tennessee has a unique opportunity to bolster our recycling because of our tip fees. Rockwood operates a facility in Lebanon, Tennessee, and then I manage our facility in Alabama. And customer conversations in Tennessee are completely different than in Alabama. When you walk into a customer's facility, say we can recycle it for this, well, you're double what it costs me to go to landfill. I might as well go to landfill. In Tennessee, that's a completely different conversation. We're actually price competitive to be able to recycle and divert that material from a landfill, saving airspace as compared to Alabama. So I think, yes, we're a lot higher, but I think that gives us an opportunity to lead in diversion rates as opposed to kind of where we're at if we put the right infrastructure in. But I think bolstering our recycling infrastructure along with that's pretty important.
Ms. Barrett?
There was a question about the amount of trash we're exporting. It would be, if we're obtaining those numbers, could we also obtain the amount of trash we are importing?
Absolutely.
And I know there's discussion in this body of the potential loss of revenue for programs and such. Remember, our task is first and foremost to find some sustainability for our solid waste. When it comes to the programs and things that are funded, that can be part two that we look at. I don't want us having a hindrance on us that, well, we can't do anything because we lose funding if we change the current process. The current process has to change. I think everybody's in agreement with that. Then we can address the programs that get funded and choose to reinvent that process as well. But please don't let what current programs are out there and whether or not they're going to get funded be a hindrance at this point in time. Let's find something that's going to be sustainable for the next generations coming forward and not have to address this same situation 50 years down the road as we're doing it.
I think that's a good point. Any other questions or comments?
I'll ask one more.
Chairman Reeves?
So the 10-year management plan that you said that every county or every board has to put forward, who approves that? Does TDEC approve those? Is that how that process works? Or is that a local decision? How does that work?
So I guess there's probably a local decision first. Feel free.
I serve on one of those boards, so
Right.
he's asked me, if you're a regional board, each county submits their annual progress report. We receive it first part of the year. It's due to TDEC, I think, into February or March.
I think so.
March is our deadline. So the individual counties approve their information that's submitted, which includes their tonnage of diversion, as well as their tonnage that goes through the normal solid waste process. And then any adjustments to their plan for the next year in regards to how they're going to handle solid waste. Their county commission has to approve that. Then it comes to my regional board, and we do a 30-day public notice that it's available for the public to review. Then the board as a whole approves all 4 or those, or however many counties are within that. And then from there, it goes to TDEC, and you can address what TDEC does with it.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, the plan does come to us, and we have been there's questions about if are we supposed to approve or disapprove them. We've been acknowledging them if they meet the minimum requirements, right? They've got everything. And then the APRs and all that stuff are submitted to us, and we just kind of collect those and make sure that they filled out all that stuff.
So go back a slide or two where you actually had the map up there of the solid waste. Who decides how this is structured? Those regions, how does that happen? Is it population? Is it what?
I mean, ultimately,
where's that
the
come from?
counties get to decide how they want to do it. If they want to do it themselves or how they want. But I think she's a part of one, so she could.
Right.
If I may, these regional boards were originally set up when the act came about in 1991. Counties were then allowed to form coalitions. What you don't see in this was the history in 1991. We originally had 12 to 17, I think, regional boards. So that meant you had a board encompassing more than one county. Over the years, there's a process that the regional boards can dissolve and each county can have its own regional authority. And many of those boards have dissolved over the time, and we are remaining with these 7.
There's 8
Eight.
multi-county
8
boards.
boards. So they can dissolve and become their own individual county boards anytime they choose. I think it's about a year process to do that. And we've never looked into that as a central board, nor have I discussed it with any of the other boards. But we were originally set in 91.
We have had one, I think the Chester County, there was a couple that were in a region, they recently dissolved. So now they're just single county boards.
So the intention of that law, one of the intentions was to have regionality.
Promote it, yeah.
And it just doesn't look like it worked.
There's a lot of single county boards.
Interesting. All right, Mr. Thomas, or Ms. Catherine, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Before we get too far away, I want to just go back to the review of the solid waste plans. And something I think that needs to be discussed and addressed is currently when the APRs and the plans are submitted to TDEC, as Jeremy stated, it's just check marking that it's a minimum requirement. I think there should be a more robust review of the solid waste plans to make sure that the information that they're submitting is, one, correct, and that is the opportunity for them to say, are you truly making plans that are legitimate down the road that you're presenting, and not just a check mark, you submitted it. So, because we have found some issues that I won't go into a lot of detail here, but that a plan was submitted, there was a check mark, the plan did not reflect an accurate summary of what was taking place. And it's had an impact down the road. So I think that is something we need to look at with this group. Thank you.
I guess I want to ask about the 2035 plan you said you're working on. How close are we? What percentage complete would that be?
So
Roughly.
I think, we have a contract out with a third party that's helping us do that. They have submitted to us a 95% draft, but we're still going out. Like, we have a bunch of public comment stakeholder meetings coming up, and we've already done some of that. How far along percentage wise in the process? I can't give you a percentage. We're along the way, but there's still opportunity to weigh in, and I can get back to you all very quickly with the latest and what the next steps are.
I think it would be helpful for this task force to have maybe a one-page bullet point summary of that, just so we can have a punch like from the TDEC perspective. Let's see, I had another, we talked about the boards, the composition of the boards. You mentioned they are to reflect diverse interest in solid waste management. Are they generally representative of those interests from TDEC's perspective? When you see the makeup, you see who gets appointed. Are they pretty diverse from the standpoint of the needs of the community? Or are they slanted in a way where nothing's going to get passed? Or what's your opinion on that?
I don't know, because I haven't been as involved with those. I will get back to you on that. I know there's some counties that didn't know who was on their board. So, but there are others that do, and actively participate, but I don't know what the composition looks like off the top of my head.
The other question I had is I think it was mentioned, the 25% reduction requirement from a previous law. How, was it just suggestive, or is there some enforceability of that? And where are we in that?
Yeah. So it's a 25% reduction from class 1 facilities, which can be tricky, right? So it means that, like, if you send something to a class 3 landfill, then you're reducing what's going into a class 1. I think a lot of counties meet that over time. If they don't, we have a follow-up with them where you kind of like evaluate that and talk with them. I've never seen us come down hard on anybody. I think we try to just work with folks. Could we legally come down hard? I would have to get back to you on that, but that's not what we've done in practice.
Mr. Thomas?
Explain to me the 25% reduction. Is that 25% from the volume that they had in 1995?
That's right.
So it's not like an annual or
That's a good point.
periodic thing.
It's from a baseline of 1995.
Okay. And then this may not be your area, but can you explain the process that TDEC undertakes when they receive one of these plans? What level and depth of review and feedback and stuff does TDEC do for regional plans?
Good question. And I have not been a part of that, and we've been evaluating that. So I will get back to you on what we have done historically and what we're looking like we're going to be doing moving forward. But we certainly get them in and review them. But I just, as we sit here, I can't speak to what that looks like.
Are you aware of any plan that's been rejected?
I'm not aware, but I will ask our folks.
Okay.
I had a question about the convenience centers. Looking at the map, and I think there's one required in each county, at least one collection point. There's some pretty significant geographical gaps across the county, especially in West Tennessee and Northwest Tennessee. And I just wonder what amount of contribution that has to litter and dumping trash in gullies and whatever else.
That's a good question. I would think that it increases it, right? I think illegal dumping is more likely if there is not sufficient infrastructure and if costs are too high. We see that with tires, with all kinds of things. Off the top of my head, I don't know. We do get complaints about illegal dumping, so I can look through our database. But that's certainly a potential, right? Like if it's not easy, there's a good chance folks are just going to dump it off somewhere.
Well, I'd love to know what any follow-up information you have on that from your folks. I would assume you guys get those complaints.
We do.
And okay, great. Any other? Ms. Cawthorn?
Thank you. I just want to briefly go back to the APR information before we completely leave it. I'll take up for the solid waste directors while I'm saying this, who have to work with the industries to prepare the information that goes to the regional boards prior to going to TDEC. But one of the struggles that I continuously hear from solid waste directors is the gathering of information from industries within their counties on the recycling that's taking place so that they can give the most accurate, robust information to the counties that's supplied to TDEC. Not going to solve this with my comment, but I think that is something that our task force should look at, is how that can work together. Industry and the solid waste directors can work together when preparing the APRs to make sure we're getting the most robust information available to us to make our information as correct as possible. Just purely a statement.
Excellent point. Ms. Kern?
Yes, with the convenience centers, kind of a two-part question. Is there consistency across the state with what items are accepted at these centers? And then also, is there data to support that this is offsetting what is going into the landfill?
So yeah, I would say the convenience centers there's consistency. Some do offer more recycling than and others don't. They have used oil drop-offs there, but consistently, yeah, I would say across the state, they're taking similar items, household trash, stuff like that. And your last question was it in regards to the convenience centers?
Yes, with the items that they're collecting at those, is there data to support the offset for landfill?
Well, most of the stuff that goes to a convenience center ends up at a landfill. Now, the recyclables could not. I mean, they could go on somewhere. And I don't know off the top of my head how many facilities offer recycling and how much of that does not up in a landfill. I'd be happy to look into it.
So I guess another question on top of that. So the efforts of the convenience centers, if we're just putting that in the landfill, that just seems, why are we exerting the effort into that if we're just putting it in the landfill?
The convenience centers are meant to be a tool for, in particular, folks who don't have good access to curbside or other things, to take their waste or recyclables to an area that is manned, that has some requirements for it. So it's not just a dump area. There used to be these green boxes that were not really regulated across the state. and folks would drop them off there, they would become nasty and contaminate the general area. So convenience centers were a way to provide a tool for folks to use. It's not necessarily to keep stuff out of a landfill. It's to help get the waste to its end destination, which is often a landfill, in a safer manner,
Okay, thank you.
environmentally safer manner.
Thank you.
Public health.
In my county in particular, I think citizens believe, based on their tax structure, they're paying for that service, that they're paying for the landfill and trash disposal. So that convenience center is a place to take it versus hauling it all the way across the county to the actual landfill, and also keeps it out of the ditch. You know, that's one of the main things. But you also have to police it. And when you leave it without people there, then the next county over brings their trash to your receptacles. And we have that quite a bit. Even at the convenience centers, they're having to watch license plates, and they don't take commercial trash. So there are certain rules that each county sets up. Ms. Barrett.
Thank you. Let's see if I can remember the questions. In regards to meeting the 25%, that question that came up, and how we collect the data, industry helps us tremendously meet that requirement. And the industry has two ways to report that information. Depending on the industry, for example, we've got Publix throughout the state. They report the whole numbers, their collected diversion to the state, and the state adds that to the individual counties where it is. Then we have other industries, let's say, for example, Barrett Manufacturing, that would report to its local solid waste director facility. So there's two different options for industry to get their tonnage information supported, presented, and reported on the APRs that come in. And the question was asked about the convenience centers and documenting it. That tonnage of items that come in and go through recycling is, at least I know in my 4 counties, and I'm sure it's the same in Murray and others, is kept by the solid waste departments, and then that gets collectively added to show how much tonnage went to the dump and or landfill versus how much actually got diverted through the recycling bins that are on there. And I know in Rutherford County, we have 14 convenience centers that are also recycling centers, meaning you can drop just bagged garbage, all mixed, that will go to the landfill, or you can have a bin that puts things in individually for the recyclables. The one thing I will say that the APRs point out to Stacy's comment that the counties do struggle with, and they do in my 4 counties. We have our solid waste individuals and departments do a really good job of going that extra mile, identifying litterers. The problem they have is that enforcement for that is at the local level, and the local level is not enforcing those litterers. So we can pass all the littering fines we want to up here, but if the local DAs won't pick up those cases and prosecute them, it doesn't matter if it's a $15,000 fine. That littering is not going to get enforced. And I've just put our solid waste departments doing a whole lot of work and getting no result out of it. And that's monies that usually is earmarked to go to their department. So we do have that as a lax that we see in the process as well.
Very good points. Chairman Reeves.
Something else I just thought of here. So we're 40 out of 50 states in recycling. Is that what you said up there?
That evaluation put us at 48th.
Out of 50 states?
That's right.
Is that an access issue? Is that an education issue? Is it an incentive issue? Is it, why aren't Tennesseans doing that?
I would say all of the above. I think, like I said, in many cases, it's cheaper to take something to a landfill or dispose of it. I think there is an education component to that. I also think there's an infrastructure component to it, right? Like, even if someone wanted to, if the infrastructure is not there and it's not easy to use, like we just said, if there's not a convenience center, you're more likely to get illegal dumping. If there's not easy to use recycling options, folks are less likely to go out of their way to try to make that happen. There is some complications to recycling. It can't be contaminated with too much, and it'd have to be clean, which if folks are throwing things away into a recycling bin and it's mixed with trash or it's contaminated, it's got a bunch of material in it still, then that stuff is not easily recyclable, often thrown off to the side. So I think it's a lot of those things. And, the markets vary, right? I mean, the markets will go up and down depending on a lot of different stuff, but I would also be interested in hearing from some of the locals as well.
How much recycling is built into that footprint up there? Are the recycling centers scattered throughout that, or it's not part of that?
Convenience centers do offer recycling.
All of them?
Probably not all of them. And I would suspect in some of the more rural areas in particular don't offer it, but they can offer it. It can be offered by local government. I think Chattanooga or someone, I heard them talking the other day, they offer recycling for their citizens, but there had been talk about maybe getting rid of that because of costs. And then a private citizen can contract out a third party. So like when you have curbside pickup for your trash, you can ask for another can and put recyclables in it. So it varies. That there are options, but it's not concrete and standard across the entire state.
Any other questions or comments? I think there is an opportunity that you talked about, and it's already been touched on with the food waste. You know, that could be a significant volume just in itself. And I think the public perception and desirability of composting could be an advantage that we take to at least get that part of the waste stream redirected, and folks might be more apt to approve locally some kind of composting facility versus a Class 1 landfill. So there may be an opportunity there that gets rid of some better percentage than we're talking about. Anyone else? Because I know going through all the information been presented, we each think of something else, especially when somebody else asks a question or makes a comment. So got a valuable presenter here, so, and member of the task force. Ms. Kern.
On the composting facilities, I know there are minimal amount of those across the state. Is there a spot we can find more information on that? Like, I live near Johnson City. I didn't even know that existed.
Yes. So all these permits are on our public facing data viewer. I mean, I can get it to you.
Okay.
But all these permits, they're on our public facing data viewer. So you could see what the permit is and what it is allowed to take. In addition, you know, I honestly don't know who runs that one, but you may be able to, in addition, search composting in that area, and then they may have their own page. But I'm happy to help you figure that out.
So these are more private companies that.
So Sevier County is probably our best example of composting, and they're like, I guess, a quasi government. It's Sevier Solid Waste something. But they have some sort of agreement with like the Gatlinburgs and the Pigeon Forge to take a lot of their stuff there. So they compost a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And how exactly they make it work, I don't know off the top of my head, but it would be worth looking into.
And I know they operate an incinerator there also in combination with that. Well, just curious, I didn't know, you know, how are we using this this composting facilities? Like, are we taking things there? Is it more of a private individual that is responsible? Like, how is this providing support to
I think the structures are set up dependent upon how they have it. You know, it can be that, you know, there's one somewhere over here near Nashville, and I think Nashville picks up or has at least picked up compost and taken it there. So it's kind of a joint partnership between the government and them, or these compost facilities will enter into some sort of contract with a business that wants to manage their food waste or something like that, or green waste. They can do it however they wish. We can look at that in more detail and see how each ones of these do it and see if there's one that seems to work better. But I think the intent is when they permit these things is they see an opportunity to take material that's there, you know, whether that be directly from someone or in conjunction with a partnership with the local government.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, seeing none, I think at this point we may go ahead and break for lunch. I think we verified the food will be there.
Be up on the 8th floor.
Be on, yeah, the
8B, 15, 20 minutes or so from now.
And then we'll probably reconvene here at high noon.
Let's do that.
That'll get us a little ahead of schedule. So I don't think anybody be opposed to that unless Ms. Barrett wants to delay her return in that traffic. I'm sure she doesn't, nor do I. Okay, well, we will stand adjourned until 12 o'clock.